I never allowed my son to enter the basement. When he married a gold digger, I installed a new lock with a code. While I was away on a business trip, my son called me in desperation. "Dad, she went into the basement," and I had already expected this. So I started my plan. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I was sitting in a hotel conference room in Denver when my phone rang. The meeting had just wrapped up, and I was gathering my papers when I saw Jasper's name flash across the screen. My son rarely called during business hours. He knew my schedule. Something was wrong. "Jasper?" I answered, already feeling my chest tighten. "Dad, she got in." His voice was shaking. "Amara got into the basement. She knows the code somehow. Dad, I don't know what to do." The papers slipped from my hands and scattered across the polished mahogany table. 23 years. 23 years of keeping that door locked, of protecting what was down there, of waiting for the right moment that never seemed to come. What did she see? My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Everything, I think. The filing cabinets are open, papers everywhere. She's furious, Dad. She's saying things, terrible things about you, about Mom." He paused, and I could hear her voice in the background, sharp and angry. "She wants to talk to you." "Don't put her on," I said quickly. "Jasper, listen to me carefully. Is she still down there?" "No, she's upstairs, pacing, going through her phone like she's looking something up." I closed my eyes. At 63 years old, I'd been through enough to know when a storm was coming. This wasn't just a storm. This was a hurricane I'd been preparing for since the day Jasper brought Amara home 3 years ago. The moment I met her, I knew. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the lessons life had beaten into me, but I saw right through that practiced smile and those calculated compliments. The way she assessed the house during that first dinner, her eyes lingering on the antique chandelier, the original hardwood floors, the paintings Margaret had collected over the years. The way she asked pointed questions about my business, about retirement plans, about what would happen to the house someday. Margaret would have seen it too. My wife had always been better at reading people than I was. But Margaret was gone, had been gone for 15 years, and Jasper was alone and vulnerable when Amara found him. "Dad, are you still there?" "I'm here, son. I'm booking the first flight home." "She's saying you've been hiding things from me, that you don't trust me, that you've been controlling everything." His voice cracked. "Is that true?" I felt something break inside my chest. After everything I'd done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, protecting what Margaret and I built together, this was what it came to. My own son questioning whether I'd been manipulating him. "Jasper, everything I've done has been to protect you. I need you to trust me until I get home. Can you do that?" Silence stretched between us. In that pause, I could hear 35 years of fatherhood hanging in the balance. The scraped knees I'd bandaged, the baseball games where I cheered until my voice went hoarse, the college tuition I'd paid without hesitation, the nights I'd stayed up helping him through heartbreak and disappointment. All of it weighed against whatever poison Amara had dripped into his ear over the past 3 years. "Okay," he finally said. "But Dad, she's really angry. I've never seen her like this." Of course she was angry. She'd just discovered that every plan she'd carefully constructed was built on sand. I'd made sure of that the day Jasper told me he was going to propose. "I'll be home by tonight," I told him. "Don't let her take anything from that basement. And Jasper, don't sign anything she puts in front of you. Promise me." "I promise." I hung up and immediately pulled up flight options on my phone. My hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, but from something deeper. Exhaustion, maybe. The weight of carrying secrets for so long, of being the guardian of a legacy that my son didn't even fully understand yet. The basement had been off limits since Jasper was a child. When he was young, I'd told him it was dangerous, that the stairs were unstable, that there were old chemicals down there from previous owners. As he got older, the excuse changed. It was my private office space. It was full of old business documents that needed to stay organized. It was where I kept things that reminded me too much of his mother. None of it was entirely a lie, but none of it was the full truth either. After Margaret died, I'd spent months going through everything, organizing our life together into something comprehensible, her clothes, her jewelry, her paintings, but more importantly, the documents, the will she'd made me promise to protect, the trust she'd set up with her attorney 6 months before the cancer took her, when she was still clear-headed enough to see the future and plan for it. Margaret had always been the smart one, the one who thought 3 steps ahead. She'd grown up poor, watched her own mother lose everything to a manipulative second husband after her father died. She swore it would never happen to our family. "Promise me, Elliot," she'd said, one night in the hospital, her hand skeletal in mine. "Promise me you'll protect what we built, not for yourself, for Jasper. There are people in this world who will see him as a meal ticket, and he's too kind to see them coming." I'd promised, and I'd spent 15 years keeping that promise. The trust was ironclad. Everything, the house, the savings, the investment accounts, the life insurance, all of it was locked in a trust that only Jasper could access, not his spouse, not his future ex-spouse, just Jasper. Margaret had worked with the best estate attorney in the state to make sure there were no loopholes, no ways for someone to manipulate their way into our family's security. I'd added my own protections over the years. When Jasper started dating seriously in his late 20s, I'd quietly consulted with attorneys about prenuptial agreements, about how to protect assets in Colorado, about what rights a spouse had to inherited property. I'd learned everything I needed to know. When he told me about Amara, when he showed me the ring he'd bought with such hope in his eyes, I'd smiled and hugged him and told him I was happy for him. Then I'd called my attorney and made sure everything was documented, ironclad, unbreakable. The prenuptial agreement had been my idea, though I'd made it seem like it came from the attorney as a standard practice for families with estates over a certain value. Jasper had been embarrassed to ask Amara to sign it, but I'd insisted. She'd signed it with barely a glance, probably thinking it was just a formality, that she'd have years to work around it to convince Jasper to change things. She was wrong. I boarded the flight 3 hours later, my stomach churning. I'd texted Jasper twice. Brief messages, "Hang in there, I'm coming." He'd responded with simple acknowledgments, "Okay, see you soon." During the flight, I couldn't stop thinking about Margaret, about how she'd seen this coming, how she'd protected our son even from beyond the grave. I wished she was here now, wished I could hear her voice telling me I'd done the right thing. But I was alone with this burden, just as I'd been alone with it for 15 years. And now, finally, the moment I'd been dreading and preparing for had arrived. Amara had opened Pandora's box, and there was no closing it again. The flight felt endless. Every minute stretched into an eternity as I stared out at the clouds, my mind replaying the past 3 years like a film I couldn't pause. I'd known something was wrong from that first dinner. Jasper had been 32 when he met Amara at some charity event downtown. He'd come home that week glowing, talking about this incredible woman who understood him, who made him laugh, who shared his interest. I'd been cautiously optimistic. My son deserved happiness. After a string of failed relationships in his 20s, he deserved someone genuine. Then I met her. Amara was beautiful, I'll give her that. 28 years old, with the kind of polished appearance that comes from expensive salons and carefully chosen clothes. She'd shown up to dinner in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, heels that clicked authoritatively across my hardwood floors, her dark hair styled in loose waves that looked effortless, but certainly weren't. "Mr. Thorne, it's such an honor to finally meet you," she'd said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Jasper has told me so much about you and this beautiful home." The way she'd said home, with just a slight emphasis, had been my first warning. Throughout dinner, she'd been charming, asked about my business, about Margaret, about how Jasper had grown up. She'd laughed at my stories, touched Jasper's arm affectionately, and complimented everything from the roast to the china pattern. But I'd watched her eyes. They'd wandered constantly, taking inventory. When she thought no one was looking, she'd examined the silver candlesticks on the mantel, the Persian rug in the living room, the original oil paintings Margaret had loved. I'd seen her fingers brush against the marble countertop in the kitchen, assessing, calculating. After she left that night, Jasper had been euphoric. "She's amazing, isn't she, Dad? I think she might be the one." I'd smiled and told him to take his time, to really get to know her. Inside, alarm bells were ringing so loud I could barely hear myself think. I'd started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. 6 months into their relationship, Amara had started making suggestions. The house could use some updating, didn't Jasper think? The kitchen was so dated. The master bathroom could be completely redone. She knew a wonderful contractor. Jasper had mentioned it to me casually one Sunday when he'd come over for lunch. "Amara thinks we should renovate a few rooms. She's got great taste, Dad. You should see some of the designs she's shown me." She'd already inserted herself into ownership of a house she didn't live in, that belonged to a trust she knew nothing about. "The house is fine as it is," I'd said carefully. "Your mother and I chose every detail together. I'm not ready to change that." I'd seen the flash of irritation cross Jasper's face. "Dad, it's been 15 years. Don't you think Mom would want the house to feel current? To be functional for a new generation?" The manipulation was subtle but effective. She was using Margaret's memory against me, making me seem like I was living in the past, being unreasonable. And Jasper, desperate to please this woman he was falling for, couldn't see it. The suggestions had continued. Maybe Jasper should ask me about retirement plans. Was I thinking about downsizing? What would happen to the house if something happened to me? Had I updated my will recently? Every question came filtered through Jasper, delivered casually, as if Amara was just being practical, just thinking ahead. But I heard what she was really asking. When do I get access to the money? I'd deflected, changed subjects, kept my answers vague. And I'd called my attorney to make absolutely certain every document was sealed tight. When Jasper had told me he was going to propose, my heart had sunk. I'd seen the ring, a beautiful antique piece that had cost him $8,000 he'd saved carefully. I'd seen the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability of a man in love. "I'm happy for you, son," I'd said, hugging him, and I was. I wanted Jasper to be happy, to have the kind of marriage Margaret and I had shared. But I also knew Amara wasn't capable of giving him that. The wedding had been elaborate. Amara had insisted on a venue that cost $45,000, flowers that cost $12,000, a dress that cost $8,000. Jasper had struggled to pay for it, too proud to ask me for help. I'd given them $20,000 as a wedding gift, knowing most of it would go toward paying off wedding debt. Amara had kissed my cheek and called me the most generous father-in-law, but her eyes had been cold, calculating. $20,000 was nice, but it wasn't the real prize. The real prize was sitting in trust documents in my basement, and she had no idea yet that she'd never touch it. After the wedding, things had escalated. Amara had moved into Jasper's small condo, the one he'd bought with his own money from his job as an architect. Within weeks, she'd started complaining. It was too small. They needed more space. They should move into the family house with me. Think of all the room they'd have. Think of how much they'd save on rent and utilities. I'd shut that down immediately. The house stays as it is. When I'm gone, it'll be Jasper's to do with as he pleases, but while I'm alive, it's my space. I'd seen the fury flash across Amara's face before she'd hidden it behind a tight smile. "Of course, Dad, I understand completely." But she'd started working on Jasper differently after that. I'd overhear conversations when they visited. How I was getting older, how it wasn't safe for me to live alone in such a big house. What if I fell? What if something happened? She was patient, I'll give her that. She played the long game. My phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. "She wants to call you." Should I let her? I typed back quickly. "No, wait until I'm home. Don't engage." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Okay, I could feel Jasper pulling away already, confused and torn between his wife and his father. Exactly what Amara wanted. The plane finally landed at 7:43 p.m. I'd been gone for 3 days, and in that time, everything had changed. I grabbed my carry-on and headed straight to my car in long-term parking. The drive home took 32 minutes. 32 minutes of rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd handle this, how I'd explain 15 years of protection without sounding like the controlling Father Amara had probably painted me as. When I pulled into the driveway, both their cars were there. Jasper's sensible Toyota and Amara's BMW, the one she'd convinced him to co-sign a loan for 6 months after the wedding. A $48,000 car that he was making payments on. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering strength. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. "You're stronger than you think, Elliot. Protect our boy." I grabbed my bag and walked to the front door. It opened before I could turn my key. Jasper stood there looking exhausted. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. My son, who rarely showed stress, looked like he'd aged 5 years in one day. "Dad," he said quietly. Behind him, Amara appeared. She was dressed casually, jeans and a silk blouse, but there was nothing casual about the way she carried herself. She looked like a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. "Elliot," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but with an edge underneath. "We need to talk." I stepped inside my own home, the home Margaret and I had bought 37 years ago, the home where we'd raised our son, the home that held every memory of our life together. "Yes," I said calmly, "I believe we do." Amara's smile was sharp as a knife. She was ready for battle, but so was I. We sat in the living room, the three of us positioned like chess pieces. I took my usual chair, the worn leather recliner that had molded to my shape over decades. Jasper sat on the couch, perched on the edge like he might need to run at any moment. Amara claimed the other end of the couch, angling her body toward me, her posture perfect, controlled. "I'm going to be direct," Amara said, not waiting for anyone else to speak. "I found documents in the basement, documents about trusts and estates and legal protections that my husband knew nothing about." Jasper flinched at the word husband, at the way she wielded it like a weapon. "Documents that concern our family are kept secure," I said evenly. "That's why the basement has always been locked." "Secure from your own son?" Her eyebrow arched. "Or secure from me?" The question hung in the air. Jasper was staring at his hands, his jaw clenched tight. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. "Both," I said, deciding there was no point in pretending anymore. "The trust was established by Margaret before she died. It protects assets for Jasper's future. Assets that remain separate from marital property." Amara's laugh was cold, brittle. "Marital property? You mean you made sure I'd never have any claim to this family's money?" "I made sure the legacy Margaret and I built would go to our son. Yes, exactly as she intended." "Dad," Jasper finally spoke, his voice strained. "You should have told me about this. I had a right to know." The pain in his voice cut deeper than any of Amara's accusations. This was what I'd feared most. Not her anger, but his hurt, his sense of betrayal. "You're right," I said, meeting his eyes. "I should have. I was waiting for the right time, and I kept waiting. And then suddenly, 3 years had passed." "The right time?" Amara repeated mockingly. "Or were you waiting to see if I'd leave, hoping your son's marriage would fail so you could keep your precious control?" "I was waiting to see if you'd show your true colors," I said quietly. "And now you have." Her face flushed red. "My true colors? I love your son. I've stood by him for 3 years. I've put up with your cold shoulders and your barely concealed disapproval. I've smiled through every family dinner where you treated me like I was some kind of intruder." "You are an intruder," I said, and Jasper made a small sound of distress. "From the first dinner, you were calculating the value of everything in this house. You've spent 3 years trying to manipulate Jasper into getting access to money that isn't yours and never will be." "That's not true," Jasper said, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. Amara turned to him, her expression softening into something that might have been convincing if I hadn't seen the hardness underneath. "Jasper, honey, your father has poisoned your mind against me. He's been controlling you your entire life. Can't you see that?" "I can see perfectly well," I said. "I can see that 6 months after the wedding, you convinced Jasper to co-sign a loan for a car that cost $48,000, a car you picked out that you drive, that he makes payments on." Jasper's head snapped up. "How do you know about that?" "Because I pay attention to my son. I notice when he stops talking about saving for a house, because suddenly all his money is going somewhere else." "We needed a reliable car," Amara protested. You needed a BMW? I kept my voice level, factual. Jasper, how much are the monthly payments on that car? He hesitated. $732. And how much were you paying for your Toyota before that? The one that was only 3 years old and ran perfectly? $285, he admitted quietly. So you're paying an extra $447 a month because Amara needed a luxury vehicle. I turned back to her. What else did you need? The designer furniture for the condo? The vacation to Cabo that cost $8,000? The remodeled kitchen that Jasper mentioned you wanted for this house? I was trying to build a nice life for us, Amara said, but her voice had taken on a defensive edge. You were spending money that wasn't yours and trying to figure out how to access money you'd never earned. I pulled out my phone and opened my email, finding the message I'd prepared before I left Denver. I had a conversation with my attorney today. He confirmed that the prenuptial agreement you signed before the wedding is completely valid and enforceable. Amara went very still. What prenuptial agreement? The one you signed 3 days before the wedding. The one my attorney walked you through. The one that specifies in clear language that all assets held in the family trust remain separate property, and that in the event of divorce, neither party has any claim to the other's premarital assets. I watched the blood drain from her face as memory caught up with rage. She'd signed it, barely reading it, probably thinking it was just standard paperwork. She'd been so focused on getting to the altar, on securing her position, that she hadn't paid attention to the details. You tricked me, she whispered. I protected my son. There's a difference. Jasper was staring at both of us like we were strangers. I don't understand. Amara, you knew about the prenup. We talked about it. I thought it was just formality, she said, her voice rising. I thought your father was just being careful. I didn't think he was trying to cut me out of everything. Everything that was never yours to begin with, I corrected. The house is held in trust. The investments are held in trust. My life insurance policy names Jasper as the sole beneficiary, with the payout going directly into the trust. Even if something happened to me tomorrow, you wouldn't see a penny. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jasper looked like I'd slapped him. Amara looked like she wanted to slap me. So that's it? Amara said finally. You've made sure that even if I stay married to your son for 50 years, I'll never be a real part of this family? You were never trying to be part of this family, I said. You were trying to buy your way into comfort and security without earning it. I've watched you for 3 years, Amara. I've watched you isolate Jasper from his friends. I've watched you create arguments between us over trivial things. I've watched you spend his money like it was water while you contributed nothing. I contributed nothing? Her voice went shrill. I gave up my apartment to move in with him. I've supported his career, gone to his work events, played the dutiful wife. You haven't worked a single day since the wedding, I pointed out. You told Jasper you were going to look for a job in marketing. That was 2 years and 8 months ago. Where's the job, Amara? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Jasper was looking at her now, really looking, and I could see the pieces clicking together in his mind. The excuses about interviews that never panned out. The promises to start sending out resumes. The reasons why she needed just a few more months to figure out what she really wanted to do. This is unbelievable, Amara said, standing abruptly. You've been investigating me? Keeping tabs on me like I'm some kind of criminal? I've been watching someone who I suspected was using my son for financial gain, and everything I've seen has confirmed that suspicion. She turned to Jasper, her eyes wild. Are you going to let him talk to me like this? I'm your wife. Jasper looked between us, his face pale. Amara, is it true? Have you not been looking for work? I've been building a life with you, she said. But there was desperation creeping into her voice now. I've been making our home comfortable, planning for our future. Planning for a future in my house, I interjected. You've brought it up at least a dozen times in the past year. How much more sense it would make for you and Jasper to live here. How I was getting older and needed help maintaining the property. How you could take care of everything if you just moved in. That's called caring about family, Amara shot back. No, I said quietly. That's called positioning yourself to take over assets you think you can eventually control. Jasper stood up suddenly. I need air. I need to think. He walked toward the back door, stepping out onto the patio. Through the window, I could see him gripping the railing, his shoulders shaking. Amara rounded on me the moment he was gone. "You're destroying my marriage. You destroyed it yourself, the moment you decided my son was a means to an end, rather than a person worth loving." Her mask finally cracked completely. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so noble, protecting your precious legacy. But all you've done is made sure your son will never have a normal marriage, never have a partner who feels like an equal. A partner who is an equal wouldn't need access to money she didn't earn, wouldn't need control over assets built by people who died before she ever met their son." "I could take you to court," she hissed. "Challenge the trust, the prenup, all of it." "You could try," I agreed. "You'd lose." Margaret's attorney was very thorough. "But you're welcome to waste your money on lawyers if you'd like." She stared at me with pure hatred, and for a moment I saw exactly who she really was. Not the charming woman who'd walked through my door 3 years ago. Not the loving wife she'd pretended to be. Just someone angry that her carefully laid plans had fallen apart. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes," I replied. It is." I found Jasper on the patio, his hands gripping the wooden railing so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of the honeysuckle Margaret had planted along the fence 20 years ago. It should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. "Son," I said softly, stepping outside. He didn't turn around. "How long have you known? About Amara? About what she wanted?" "From the first dinner." He let out a shaky breath. "And you never said anything. Would you have listened?" I moved to stand beside him, both of us looking out at the yard Margaret had loved. "You were in love. Happy for the first time in years." What was I supposed to say? "I think your girlfriend is a gold digger. You would have chosen her and cut me out of your life." "Okay, so instead you just let me marry her? Let me commit my life to someone you thought was using me?" The pain in his voice made my chest ache. "I hoped I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong, and I made sure that if I wasn't wrong, you'd be protected." "Protected," he repeated bitterly. "Is that what this is? Because it feels like you've been controlling my life, deciding what I get to know, treating me like I can't make my own decisions." "The trust was your mother's idea, Jasper, not mine." That made him turn. His eyes were red-rimmed, devastated. "Mom made a trust to keep my wife from accessing family money? Your mother made a trust to protect you from anyone who might try to use you for what we'd built together. She grew up poor, watched her own mother lose everything to a stepfather who married her for money. She swore it would never happen to you." I pulled out my wallet and removed the small, worn photograph I'd carried for 15 years. Margaret in the hospital, thin and pale but smiling, holding Jasper's hand. He'd been 20 then, about to start his junior year of college, still believing his mother would beat the cancer. 6 months before she died, your mom spent 3 afternoons with her attorney. She was very specific about what she wanted. The house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it protected in a trust that you'd control when the time was right. She made me promise to guard it until you were established in your own life. Jasper took the photo with trembling hands. She never told me. She didn't want you to feel different from your friends. Didn't want you to grow up thinking about money and inheritance. She wanted you to build your own life, your own career, your own character. The trust was just meant to be there as a foundation, a safety net. And the prenup? I took a deep breath. That was me. After I met Amara, after I saw how she looked at this house, at the life we'd built, I knew I needed another layer of protection. I'm sorry I didn't tell you my concerns directly. I should have. But Jasper, I've watched you brush off my worries before. Remember when you were 25 and dating that woman who borrowed $5,000 from you and never paid it back? He flinched. Sarah, that was different. She was going through a hard time. You told me I was being too suspicious when I suggested you get the loan in writing. She disappeared 3 weeks later. Or when you were 28 and your friend Connor convinced you to invest in his startup. He needed capital. He needed $12,000 of your money, which vanished when the business folded 6 months later. You told me I didn't understand entrepreneurship, that I didn't trust your judgment. Jasper was quiet, his jaw working. We both knew I was right. My son had a generous heart, maybe too generous. He wanted to see the best in people, wanted to believe everyone was as genuine as he was. Margaret had known that too. It was one of the things she'd loved most about him, and one of the things that had terrified her. Behind us, the patio door slid open. Amara stood there, and something about her had changed. The careful composure was gone. Her hair was slightly mussed, her makeup smudged under one eye. She looked cornered, dangerous. "I can hear you out here, you know," she said, "talking about me like I'm some kind of monster." "We're talking about facts," I said calmly. "Facts you've been avoiding for 3 years." She stepped fully onto the patio. "Fine. You want facts? Here's a fact. I did look at this house and think about what it would be like to live here. I did hope that maybe someday we'd inherit it. That's not a crime, Elliot. That's normal." "Hoping to inherit someday is normal," I agreed. "Plotting to move in while I'm still alive, trying to convince Jasper to pressure me into signing things over, researching ways to challenge estate planning, that's different." Her eyes widened. "I never researched anything. Your browser history says otherwise. I have excellent security on my home network, Amara. I've seen every search you've made while connected to my Wi-Fi. Estate trust loopholes, how to challenge a prenup, rights of surviving spouse in Colorado. You've been planning this for over a year." Jasper's head snapped toward her. "Amara, tell me that's not true." She opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "What did you expect? You think I wanted to stay in that cramped condo forever? You think I wanted to watch you go to work every day while your father sits on a fortune and treats me like I'm garbage?" "I never treated you like garbage," I said. "I treated you with the exact amount of warmth you deserved, which was very little. Because you decided I wasn't good enough for your son the second you met me. Because I didn't come from money like your precious Margaret did." "My wife came from nothing," I said, my voice hardening. "She grew up in a trailer park. Her father was a mechanic who died when she was 12. Her mother cleaned houses. Margaret worked her way through college, through graduate school, built a career as a CPA. Every dollar we had, we earned together. So, don't you dare use her as some kind of privileged comparison." Amara blinked, clearly not having expected that. She'd probably assumed Margaret came from wealth, that I'd married into money rather than building it. "The difference between you and Margaret," I continued, "is that she never expected anything handed to her. She never looked at what others had and felt entitled to it. She worked, she saved, she sacrificed. You've done none of those things." "I sacrificed for this marriage," Amara shot back. "I gave up my independence, my own apartment, my own life, to build something with Jasper. You gave up a $600 a month studio apartment to move into Jasper's paid-off condo," I said. "That's not sacrifice, that's upgrade. And you haven't built anything. You've spent Jasper's money while contributing nothing. No income, no savings, no partnership, just consumption." "Dad," Jasper said weakly, but he didn't defend her. That silence spoke volumes. Amara's face was flushed now, her breathing quick. "This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? To turn him against me, to destroy what we have." "What you have," I said quietly, "was built on lies and manipulation. I didn't destroy it, I just shined a light on what was already there." "You son of a bitch," she hissed. Then she turned to Jasper, her voice shifting, becoming pleading. "Jasper, honey, please, don't let him do this. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can talk through everything. But you have to choose, me or him." It was the ultimatum I'd known was coming, the final card she had to play. She was betting that Jasper loved her more than he loved the truth. Jasper looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were swimming with tears, his face etched with pain. This was the moment where everything would change, and we all knew it. "When we first started dating," he said slowly, "you told me you worked in marketing, that you'd left your job because the company was toxic, and you were looking for the right fit. Do you remember that?" Amara nodded warily. "I've been paying bills for almost 3 years now, our joint account, and I just realized sitting here that I've never seen a single deposit from you. Not one. You told me last Christmas that you'd gotten a freelance contract, that you'd be contributing soon. Where's that money, Amara?" She swallowed hard. "It fell through. And the contract before that. And the interview you had in September that you said went so well. And the networking event in June that was supposed to lead to opportunities. The job market is tough right now," she said defensively. "For 3 years?" His voice cracked. "Amara, I've worked 50-hour weeks for 3 years while you stayed home. I thought you were looking. I thought you were trying. Was any of it real?" The silence stretched. She could have lied again, could have manufactured more excuses. Instead, something in her broke, or maybe just stopped caring about pretending. "I didn't want to work," she said flatly. "I wanted to be taken care of. Is that so terrible? I thought you had money. Real money. I thought we'd have the kind of life where I didn't have to work some meaningless office job. And then I realized all the money was locked up in your father's control, and I've been trapped in this limbo ever since." Jasper actually took a step back, like her words had physically pushed him. "You married me because you thought I was rich? I married you because you were kind, and I cared about you, and, yes, because I thought we'd have financial security. That's not some terrible crime. People consider finances when they get married. That's real life. But you lied," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "about everything. About wanting to work, about your feelings, about who you really were. I didn't lie about caring for you, but you lied about everything else." He ran his hands through his hair. God, Dad was right. He was right about all of it. Amara's expression shifted from defensive to furious. "Fine, yes, your father was right. I wanted the money. I wanted this house. I wanted a life that didn't involve pinching pennies and worrying about bills. And I thought marrying you would give me that. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted to hear?" The devastation on Jasper's face was almost too painful to watch. This was my son, learning that the woman he'd pledged his life to had been playing a role, had seen him as a means to an end rather than a partner. "I think you should leave," Jasper said quietly. "What?" "I think you should pack some things and leave. Go stay with your sister or get a hotel. I need you out of here so I can think." Amara's fury crystallized into something cold and calculated. "This is still half my home, Jasper. We're married. You can't just kick me out." "Actually," I said, "the condo is in Jasper's name only. He bought it before you met. You have no legal claim to it." Her head whipped toward me. "You looked that up too?" "I know every asset my son owns and how it's titled. That's not control, Amara. That's being a careful parent." Waist to fall. She looked between us, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. She'd lost, and she knew it. "If I leave now, I'm not coming back," she said, a last desperate threat. Jasper met her eyes. "I know." The sound of Amara's suitcase wheels scraping across the hardwood floor echoed through the house like a death knell. It was 9:15 p.m., and I sat in the living room while Jasper stood in the doorway of his old bedroom upstairs, watching his wife pack 3 years of marriage into 2 bags. I heard her footsteps, quick and angry, moving from room to room. A drawer slammed, then another. She was taking her time, maybe hoping Jasper would crack, would tell her to stop, would take it all back. He didn't. When she finally came down the stairs, she looked nothing like the polished woman who'd sat across from me hours earlier. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, her face blotchy and streaked with mascara. She dragged both suitcases behind her, refusing to look at either of us. At the door, she finally paused. "Jasper," she said, her voice hoarse, "I need money for a hotel. I don't have anywhere else to go tonight." He pulled out his wallet slowly and handed her 3 $20 bills. $60. The gesture was so small, so final. Not enough for more than a night or two at a cheap motel. She stared at the money in her hand like it was an insult. $60? After 3 years? "You have access to our joint account," Jasper said quietly. "There's about $800 in there. Take what you need." "What I need?" Her laugh was bitter. "What I need is for you to wake up and realize your father has poisoned you against me. But I guess that's not happening." She grabbed the doorknob, yanked it open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain. She stood there for a moment, silhouetted in the doorway, and I thought maybe she'd try one more time to manipulate him, to find some crack in his resolve. Instead, she just left. The door clicked shut behind her, and seconds later, we heard her BMW start up and pull away. The silence that filled the house was deafening. Jasper stood frozen in the same spot, staring at the closed door. I watched his shoulders start to shake, and then he crumpled, just collapsed onto the bottom step of the staircase, his face in his hands, and the sobs came. Deep, wrenching sounds that tore at my heart. I moved to sit beside him, and he immediately turned into me like he was a child again. My 63-year-old body folded around my 35-year-old son, and I held him while he broke apart. "I'm so stupid," he choked out between sobs. "I'm so stupid, Dad. How did I not see it?" "You loved her," I said simply. "Love makes us see what we want to see." 3 years of my life gone, wasted on someone who was just using me. "Not wasted," I said firmly. "You learned something about people, about yourself, about what you really want in a partner. That's not waste, son. That's life." He pulled back, wiping at his eyes with his sleeve. "You tried to warn me, not directly, but I could feel it, your disapproval. And I told myself you were just being overprotective, that you couldn't let go. But you saw her. Right from the start, you saw exactly who she was." "I've had more years to learn about people," I said, "and I had the advantage of not being in love with her. It's easier to see the truth when your heart isn't involved." He let out a shaky laugh. "Mom would have seen it too, wouldn't she? The first time Amara walked through that door, your mother would have had her number. Margaret had a sixth sense about people." Jasper leaned back against the staircase, exhausted. "Tell me about the trust. I want to know everything, no more secrets." So I did. We sat there on the stairs, and I explained every detail. How Margaret had spent those last months of her life planning for a future she wouldn't be part of. How she'd worked with her attorney to create something unbreakable, designed specifically to protect Jasper from the kind of person who'd see him as a paycheck rather than a partner. The trust holds the house, all the investment accounts Mom and I built together, and the life insurance policy. It's worth about $1.3 million total. Jasper's eyes widened. "That much? Your mother was very good with money. We lived modestly, invested carefully. The house alone is worth about $600,000. The rest is in diversified investments that have grown steadily over the years. And it all comes to me when? When I die, or when I choose to transfer control, which I was planning to do on your 40th birthday." I paused. "Your mother and I thought that was a good age, old enough to have learned about life, young enough to still benefit from financial security. So, 5 more years? That was the plan. But honestly, son, after tonight, I'm thinking we should sit down with the attorney sooner. You should understand exactly what you have, what it means, how to protect it going forward." He nodded slowly, processing. "The prenup Amara signed, would it have held up if we'd stayed married?" "Absolutely. It was airtight. Even if you'd been married for 50 years, the assets in the trust would have remained separate property. She could never have touched them." She must have been furious when she realized. That's why she broke into the basement. She'd been trying to figure out the code for months, I'm sure. Probably watching me punch it in, trying to guess the pattern. "What is the code?" Jasper asked. "Your mother's birthday, 032758, March 27th, 1958. His eyes filled with tears again. Of course it was. "Everything I've done, Jasper, every decision I've made about protecting these assets, it's been about honoring your mother's wishes. She wanted you taken care of. She wanted you to have choices in life, to never be trapped by financial desperation. And she wanted to make sure that whoever you ended up with loved you, not for what you could provide." Amara failed that test pretty spectacularly. Yes, she did. I put my hand on his shoulder. "But you know what? Better to find out after 3 years than after 30. Better to find out before you had children together, before your lives were even more entangled." He was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think she ever loved me at all? Even a little?" That question broke my heart more than anything else. "I don't know, son, maybe in her own way. But it wasn't the kind of love that builds a life. It was the kind of love that has conditions and expectations and an exit strategy. I gave her everything I had," he whispered. "I worked myself exhausted to give her the life she wanted. And it was never going to be enough, was it? Because what she really wanted was in that basement, and I couldn't give her that. You couldn't give her something that wasn't yours to give, and she knew that. She's known it for a while, I think. That's why she's been getting more desperate, more pushy about moving in here, about getting me to change things." Jasper stood up slowly, like his bones ached. "I need to see it. The basement. I need to see what Mom left for me." I nodded and led him to the basement door. The keypad still showed the last access time, 14:22 yesterday. Right when I'd been in my meeting in Denver, right when Amara had finally cracked the code. I punched in the numbers and the lock clicked open. The basement wasn't finished like the rest of the house. Concrete floor, exposed beams, but organized meticulously. Filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled clearly, personal documents, financial records, insurance, medical history, property deeds. But what drew Jasper's attention was the other side of the room. A wall of shelves holding carefully preserved photo albums, boxes of Margaret's belongings, her favorite books, her jewelry box, her painting supplies. "You kept everything," Jasper said, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't let go. This was my space to remember her, to keep her close. That's the real reason I never let you down here. Not just the documents, but this. I wasn't ready to share it, wasn't ready to see you go through her things and relive the loss." Jasper walked to the shelves and picked up a photo album. He opened it to a random page, and there was Margaret, maybe 25 years old, laughing at the camera, her hair wild in the wind, young and healthy and full of life. "I forget sometimes what she looked like before the cancer," he said softly. "I forget that she was a whole person before she was sick. She was extraordinary," I said. "Brilliant and funny and so damn stubborn. When she decided something was right, there was no changing her mind. And she decided that protecting you was right. She poured everything she had left into making sure you'd be okay." He set the album down and opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were folders, each labeled in Margaret's neat handwriting, trust documents, will, life insurance, property titles, investment accounts, and in the very front, a manila envelope with Jasper's name on it. He pulled it out with trembling hands. "What's this?" "A letter. She wrote it 2 weeks before she died. Told me to give it to you when you were ready. I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right moment. Can I read it now?" "It's yours, son. It's always been yours." He opened the envelope and pulled out several pages covered in Margaret's handwriting. His eyes moved across the words, and I watched tears begin to fall. He read in silence for several minutes while I stood there, remembering the day Margaret had written those words, how weak she'd been, how determined. When he finished, he looked up at me. She knew, even then she knew I'd need protection. She knew someone might try to use me. "Your mother understood the world, Jasper, the good and the bad, and she loved you enough to prepare for both." He folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. "I miss her so much, Dad." "Me too, son. Every single day." We stood there in the basement surrounded by the physical evidence of a life lived and a love that had transcended death. Margaret had been gone for 15 years, but she was still protecting her son, still guiding us both. And finally, standing there together, Jasper and I weren't divided by secrets anymore. We were united by the truth and by the love of a woman who'd known exactly what we'd need to survive, even if she couldn't be here to give it to us herself. 6 months had passed since that night, 6 months since Amara had walked out with her 2 suitcases and $60. 6 months of healing, of rebuilding, of learning what life looked like on the other side of deception. The divorce had been swift and, thanks to the prenuptial agreement, relatively painless. Amara had tried at first to challenge it, hiring an attorney who'd taken one look at the documents and advised her to accept the settlement offered. She'd walked away with exactly what she'd brought into the marriage, nothing but her personal belongings and a car loan she couldn't afford. Last I'd heard, she'd moved to Arizona to live with her sister. Jasper had blocked her number after she'd called 17 times in the first week, alternating between begging him to reconsider and screaming about what a mistake he was making. He didn't take her back. Not once did he waver. Today was Sunday, and it had become our day. Every Sunday, Jasper came to the house for dinner. Sometimes we cooked together, attempting recipes that Margaret used to make, and usually failing in ways that made us laugh. Sometimes we ordered takeout and sat in the living room, watching whatever game was on. But mostly, we talked. "I met someone," Jasper said, cutting into the roast chicken I'd somehow managed not to burn. I looked up, surprised. "Oh? Nothing serious yet. Just coffee a couple of times. Her name is Diane. She's a landscape architect. We met at that conference I went to last month. And? He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. And she paid for her own coffee. Insisted on it, actually. Said she had a rule about always paying her own way on first dates. I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Smart woman. She asked about my family, and I told her the truth, all of it. The divorce, the reasons, everything. I figured, if that scared her off, better to know now. What did she say? She said her brother went through something similar. Got taken advantage of by someone who saw dollar signs instead of a person. She understood. We ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jasper set down his fork and looked at me seriously. I want to apologize, Dad. For what? For not trusting you. For all those times I chose Amara over your concerns. For making you feel like you couldn't be honest with me. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize for loving someone, Jasper, even if they didn't deserve it. But I do need to apologize for not seeing what was right in front of me. For being so desperate to prove I could make my own choices that I ignored obvious red flags. He paused. I've been thinking a lot about Mom lately, about what she must have gone through, making all those plans while she was dying. How scared she must have been, knowing she wouldn't be here to protect me herself. Terrified, I admitted. Some nights, she'd wake up crying, worried about what would happen to you, worried that I'd die too, and you'd be alone, worried that someone would come along and undo everything we'd built for you. The trust wasn't about control, it was about love. Everything your mother did was about love. Even the hard things, especially the hard things. Jasper reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter Margaret had written to him, now creased and worn from being read dozens of times. She wrote something in here that I keep coming back to. She said, "Real love doesn't demand access to bank accounts or property deeds. Real love is built in small moments, in shared struggles, in choosing each other, even when it's hard." She was a wise woman. She was. And she was right. Amara never chose me when it was hard. She chose me when she thought it would be easy, when she thought I came with a fortune attached. The second she realized the money wasn't accessible, she started planning her exit strategy. But you learned from it. That's what matters. I did. I learned what I don't want. And I learned that I'd rather be alone than be with someone who's only there for what I can provide. I raised my glass. That's worth drinking too. He clinked his glass against mine, and we both took a sip. The wine was a bottle Margaret had bought 20 years ago, one she'd been saving for a special occasion. I'd been saving it too, waiting for the right moment. This felt right. "I've been thinking about the trust," Jasper said, "about what we should do with it." "What do you mean?" "You said Mom wanted me to have choices, to never be trapped by money or the lack of it. But I've been working as an architect for 13 years now. I built my own career, my own savings. I don't need the trust money to survive." "Your mother wanted you to have security, Jasper. That was the whole point." "I know, but I also think she'd want the money to mean something, to do something good." He leaned forward. "What if we set up a scholarship fund for kids who lose a parent to cancer, help them pay for college the way Mom's trust has helped me?" I felt tears prick at my eyes. She would have loved that idea. "We could call it the Margaret Thorne Memorial Scholarship. Keep enough in the trust to maintain the house and provide a safety net, but use the rest to help kids who are going through what I went through. Your mother would be so proud of you right now." "I hope so." I also hope she'd be proud that I finally learned what she was trying to teach me, that the best legacy isn't money. It's character. It's choosing the right people to let into your life. It's protecting what matters and letting go of what doesn't. We finished dinner and moved to the living room, where I showed Jasper the progress I'd been making on organizing Margaret's things. We'd decided together to go through the basement to sort what we wanted to keep and what we could donate. It was time to let some of it go, to stop treating that room like a shrine and start treating it like a connection to someone we loved. "I want to keep her art supplies," Jasper said, pulling out a box of oil paints. "Maybe try my hand at painting. She always said I had her eye for color. Take whatever you want. This is all yours now, son, not because of a trust or a legal document, but because you're her child. This is your inheritance, the real one." He looked around the basement at the carefully preserved pieces of his mother's life. "You know what the strangest part is? Amara spent 3 years trying to get access to money and property, and she never once asked about Mom. Never asked what she was like, what she cared about, what made her special. She saw the assets, but never the person behind them. That tells you everything you need to know about Amara. It does. He picked up a photo of Margaret holding him as a baby, both of them laughing at something off camera. This is what I want in my life, Dad. This kind of love. The kind that lasts past death. That builds legacies, not in dollars, but in memories and lessons and moments like this. You'll find it, I assured him, now that you know what to look for. As we locked up the basement that night, Jasper paused at the keypad. Are you going to change the code? I thought about it. No. I think I'll keep it as Mom's birthday. That way, every time I punch it in, I remember why all of this matters. Not the money or the property, but the love behind it. We walked upstairs together, and I made coffee while Jasper loaded the dishwasher, a routine we'd developed over these Sunday dinners. It felt normal, comfortable, like we were building something new on the foundation Margaret had laid for us. Dad? Jasper said, as he was getting ready to leave. Thank you. Yes, for what? For protecting me, even when I didn't want to be protected, for seeing what I couldn't see, for keeping Mom's promises, even when it meant I was angry at you. I pulled him into a hug. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. After he left, I stood in the living room and looked at the photo of Margaret that I kept on the mantel. She was 35 in the picture, her smile bright and genuine, her eyes full of life. We did it, I told her quietly. He's okay, he's going to be okay. Joyce. I could almost hear her response, that mix of relief and pride she always showed when one of our plans worked out. She'd been gone 15 years, but she'd never really left. She was in every protected asset, in every lesson Jasper had learned, in every Sunday dinner we shared. The trust had protected the money, but Margaret's real legacy was something no document could capture. It was the wisdom she'd passed down, the love she'd instilled, the character she'd helped build in her son. Amara had walked away with nothing because she'd never understood what really mattered. She'd seen the house, the accounts, the life insurance policy, and thought that was the treasure. She'd missed the real wealth entirely. As I climbed the stairs to bed that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of something deeper. The knowledge that I'd kept my promises, that Margaret's love had transcended death, that our son was finally free to build the life he deserved. The basement door was locked, but what it protected wasn't really about money anymore. It was about memory, about honor, about a love story that had started 40 years ago and was still writing its final chapters. And in the end, that was the only legacy that truly mattered.